Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers.
We have full team coverage of the latest out of the Middle East. We begin with the president's high-stakes visit. Joining us, NBC News foreign correspondent Raf Sanchez and NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba to kick us off this hour. Monica, let's start with you. It's been just a few hours since President Biden touched down in Tel Aviv. He's already met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So tell us about the president's day so far and what's to come as he sees the devastation firsthand.
Well, this trip, Joe and Savannah, was all about showing solidarity with Israel and literally embracing the country after this tragedy. And we saw the president and Prime Minister Netanyahu physically hug once he arrived on that tarmac. And just now, in some remarks, the president continued to say that he wanted to show this message that the United States will continue to stand with Israel today, tomorrow, and always. But there is such a volatile backdrop to all of this and what the president is landing in. The fact that as he was heading to the airport to head to Tel Aviv, the Jordan portion of the trip was canceled because of the aftermath and the information that we're still working on to learn more about with that hospital explosion in Gaza, something that President Biden has expressed his deepest condolences to, given that loss of life that appears there. But now there are these major questions about who may have been responsible. The president, though, wanting to put the focus on why he made this trip now and why he feels, again, that the U.S. needs to stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel. Listen.
I wanted to be here today for a simple reason. I want the people of Israel, the people of the world, to know where the United States stands. The fact is that Israel, as they respond to these attacks, it seems to me that have to continue to ensure that you have what you need to defend yourselves. And we're going to make sure that occurs. And we have to also bear in mind that Hamas does not represent all the Palestinian people.
And the president is also meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu and his war cabinet to talk about what happens from here. And then later on in the day, we understand he will be meeting with some family members who lost loved ones in the terrorist attack by Hamas on October 7th. And he may also be meeting with some first responders as well while they're in Tel Aviv. Joe.
Monica, stay with us. Let me bring Raf in now. So the other big story this morning, of course, this finger pointing from both sides regarding that Gaza hospital explosion that has killed hundreds. We've also now seen protests erupt across the Middle East in response to that, including in Jordan. That is where President Biden was supposed to go for a summit with other leaders in the region before that part of the trip was canceled. What is the latest about this blast, and what type of evidence do we have about who is responsible?
Well, Savannah, it's been more than 12 hours now since that explosion, but the fog of war still hangs very heavily over the Al-Ahli hospital in Gaza City. Here's what we know. In the last couple of hours, the Israeli military has released evidence of what it says is proof that this was a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket which misfired. They're pointing to two things. One, drone footage over the hospital, which they say shows that there is no crater outside the hospital. You would expect if this was an Israeli airstrike with a heavy ordnance that there would be some kind of crater. Two, they have released what they are saying is an intercepted conversation between two Hamas officials, where these officials seem to acknowledge that this was a misfired Palestinian rocket that caused the explosion. We should be really clear. NBC News is not able to verify either of these Israeli claims. We are not able to get to the hospital ourselves. The Israel-Gaza border is sealed. The Egypt-Gaza border is sealed, so we are not able to verify this ourselves. The Palestinians are adamant that this was an Israeli airstrike. They are saying that hundreds of people were killed. It is worth saying Hamas and Islamic Jihad do not acknowledge that their rockets do fall in Gaza, which does happen. But it is also worth saying that this is a much, much larger death toll than what we would normally associate with Palestinian rockets, which are deadly, which are dangerous, but they do not normally kill hundreds of people.
So, Monica, another question is the president expected to submit a $100 billion supplemental funding request to Congress in the coming days that would help Israel. That's according to two people familiar with the matter. What should we expect to be included in that funding, and how likely is it to get through, especially with a speakerless House?
Yeah, it's not, is the short answer to that. There's a paralysis on Capitol Hill right now in the House of Representatives that without it, they won't be able to advance much more than what they can do, which is essentially draft this supplemental request where the Biden administration is preparing to ask for something in the ballpark of $100 billion to address several things, including emergency aid for Israel, including continued funding for the war in Ukraine, now, of course, stretching on into its second year, and then also addressing some other domestic priorities, things like U.S. border security. And the question here now becomes, is there enough bipartisan support for something like this? We know that there have been differing views on several pieces of it. There's also a push to include some money for Taiwan. So that is why it is such a large number. But I am also told by somebody involved in this that it's not finalized yet because the contours could change, and that could also be shifted because of the president's time on the ground in Israel, depending on what more they are asking for. But we should expect to see at least what this supplemental request looks like sometime at the end of this week when the president does return from his travels. And then there's an expectation on Capitol Hill that they could move on that in the coming weeks. Remember, we're now up against that deadline for a potential government shutdown, which is tied to all of these spending priorities. Joe and Savannah.
Monica and Raph, thank you both. Appreciate it.
We are now joined by Dan Arbel. He's a senior fellow at the Center for Middle East Policy at the Brookings Institute in Washington. Dan, thank you very much for joining us this morning. So President Biden met earlier, as we've mentioned, as we've showed these pictures, with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu soon after landing in Tel Aviv. Obviously, with the backdrop of so much happening and outrage also unfolding this morning. Explain to us the importance of his trip there and what you think his message should be while on the ground in these meetings.
Yeah, it's a historic visit of a president in Israel during time of war. It's the first time that this is happening. So in terms of showing solidarity with Israeli people and the Israeli government, this is something unprecedented. And so Israelis are just ecstatic and enthusiastic about it and are very much appreciating this. Obviously, it gives Israel, sends the message that the U.S. stands by Israel, is not tying Israel's hands with whatever Israel wants to do, at the same time providing every military item that Israel will need for this offensive that it's planning to do right after probably the president leaves, sort of a continuation of the operation, but on the ground this time.
So diplomatically speaking, how does this Gaza hospital blast impact President Biden's trip?
Well, it's a diplomatic blunder, of course, because he got on the plane, as your correspondent has mentioned, and this happened while he was there, while he was on Air Force One, leading to the cancellation of a very important summit for Biden that was scheduled in Amman, Jordan, with the King of Jordan, with Egyptian President Sisi, and with the Palestinian Authority's president. So the fact that there is no follow-up to his Israel visit complicates things for the Biden and his administration, as they're trying to show, first of all, that while they stand with Israel, they are looking for a resolution of this conflict, and they do support a humanitarian effort to create a humanitarian corridor and to help many distressed and Palestinians that are innocent Palestinians that are suffering as a result of this conflict.
Dan, as we know, the Jordan portion of the president's trip that was going to include meeting with Palestinian leadership was canceled following this explosion. How important will it be at some point for President Biden to meet also with Palestinian leaders?
It will be extremely important. Look, Anthony Blinken, when he was there last week, met with Mahmoud Abbas, the leader of the Palestinian Authority president, and it will be important for Biden to do so. Palestinians need reassuring. And Biden's message was very clear. Hamas does not represent all Palestinians. And there are many Palestinians there who are out there who want peace, who want coexistence, who do not support this terrorist nature of Hamas. And therefore, I think Biden needs to address them. I believe that he will do so when the time is right. Obviously, after the explosion in the hospital, it created complications. So it's pushing it down the road, but it will happen eventually, I believe.
All right, Dan Arbel, thank you very much for joining us this morning and giving us your expertise.
More now on that deadly hospital explosion in Gaza. Health officials there say several hundred people were killed, hundreds more were injured. Officials in Gaza and Israel, as we've been reporting, are blaming each other for the blast. Gaza journalist Akram al-Sadri is at a different hospital in Gaza and has this report.
Palestinians at large are outraged by the latest incident of targeting the Baptist hospital in the Gaza Strip. The number of people killed, the magnitude, the nature of the place that was targeted, including the fact that this is a place of a spiritual, religious value and also of a service value because it provides service to a large number of Palestinians, and also it was a shelter for thousands of Palestinian IDPs, refugees who are seeking safety in that place. That shook the consciences of the Palestinians, that made them feel that insecurity is prevailing and that there is no safe haven. They were sure that there was no safe haven in Gaza for the past few days, but this is another evidence that there is no safe haven in the Gaza Strip. Israel from one side and Hamas and the Palestinian faction from the other side were exchanging accusations about that. There's no formal statement made by the Palestinian resistance on that particular issue, but the matter of fact that a rocket, according to the expert, a rocket that hit and killed 900 people cannot be a Palestinian rocket. This is the argument that we hear and from the Palestinian side. The magnitude, the explosive, the impact, the number of people killed are all indicating that, according to the expert, that Israeli occupation is the one party responsible for that situation. The community, the medical community in Gaza, the people in Gaza, people are also feeling a deepening feel of insecurity now, accompanied by the anger resulting from that incident and also fear from whatever is coming. They see that as one more step towards pushing Palestinians more toward the south, towards Egypt, for the forced displacement program that they see in place. The medical community has already been struggling now with the loss of one hospital that became out of the service, which is the Baptist hospital. There is an increased burden on the existing hospitals that were announced to be falling apart, that were announced to be collapsing under the heavy burden resulting from the influx of injured people, and also they don't have places to save the bodies. In the Baptist hospital, there was a conference that was organized by doctors and by paramedics, and around them and in front of them there were hundreds of bodies of people who were killed, and they do not know where to store them. So catastrophic situation that is getting even more catastrophic, and people of Gaza are overwhelmed and saddened.
All right, Akram al-Sadri, thank you so much and continue to stay safe. Let's bring in NBC News military analyst, Lieutenant General Steph Twitty. Thank you for joining us. So we do want to talk more about the hospital blast in Gaza, which killed hundreds. Israel has denied responsibility, blamed Palestinian militants, but Israel doesn't have anyone actually on the ground in Gaza to investigate this. So my question is, how is something like this investigated? Will the U.S. know definitively who's responsible?
Well, what you have to do is something called a crater analysis. And in that crater analysis, you're looking to determine how wide the crater is, how deep it is, which way the projectile came from, and you hope to find residue from that particular bomb. In this case here, the Israelis do not have anyone on the ground, so they have to rely on the video feed in order to determine the things that I just talked about. That's going to take some time. They have come out with some video feed. That video feed is blurry. And so we'll see what comes through their investigation through the video feed. After they conduct that investigation, of course, they'll have to brief their military leaders and their political leaders. And I expect a statement will come out here in short order here on the findings of that investigation.
So knowing that northern Gaza, as we're seeing with this, is not completely void of Palestinian civilians or many people who are unable to leave hospitals, who need that military treatment or are even sheltering in those places, and seeing just how devastating military activity can still be in that area even after that evacuation order, how much does that complicate a potential ground invasion? I mean, both from a tactical perspective, but also as we see the reaction and the outrage to something like this spread?
Yes, there's two pieces to your question. First of all, whenever you fight an urban unfortunately, these combatants will be impacted by this. And so sadly, we're dealing with a situation here where we have the people involved in this conflict. And that's when you have people involved, you're going to have casualties. And so you're seeing the aftermath of what is to come when a ground war starts. It's just going to spiral out of control if we don't get the people migrated down south in this conflict.
All right. Lieutenant General Steph Twitty, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate your time.
Let's bring in Hagar Shamali. She is the host of Oh My World on YouTube and the former NSC director for Syria and Lebanon. Hagar, as always, it's great to have you with us. So if we could just, of course, start on this big news this morning, your assessment of this massive explosion at the Gaza hospital that killed hundreds of people, as well as what's sort of coming out in terms of the finger pointing and what is being claimed as evidence for who has done this. What do you make of this?
You know, when this originally happened, my first thought was that it's hard to lie about something like this, actually, because ultimately this information is knowable. It's provable. It's not something that one person can lie about and then hide the evidence. And, you know, it's hard when you're dealing with situations of war, mistakes often happen. You've seen it in Ukraine as well, by the way. So it's not implausible that a rocket was fired by Palestinian Islamic Jihad. That is a terrorist organization. I wouldn't believe a lot of what they say, by the way. But that one was fired by them and then fell mistakenly. We've seen that happen in many other wars. And the thing is, I think, if anything, if this highlights anything, it's that it's the catastrophe that is war. It's how ugly it is, how the tragedy of it is that the majority of people who die are innocent civilians. But the fact is that when I saw it, my view was that I didn't see why Israel would lie about it, because it's knowable information that the U.S. will do its own independent assessment of. And when I saw President Biden come out and say that it appears to have been the case, that it wasn't Israel, I'm inclined to believe him.
Hagar, we're also reporting this morning a senior Hamas official telling NBC News the group is willing to release some hostages held captive on the condition Israel stops bombing Gaza. How realistic is that? In your mind, where do things stand with the hostages right now? How could that situation possibly come to an end?
Well, it's not surprising that they're gonna try and offer that exchange, because that's why they take hostages in general, right? These are their bargaining chips, and for that reason, by the way, they're going to try and keep them alive. But it's a bit difficult. It's a bit difficult because they're basically telling Israel, okay, you stop bombing us, and we'll give you folks in exchange, hostages in exchange. But by the way, we're going to keep lobbing rockets at you. And while the Iron Dome is quite successful at intercepting rockets, it has an 85 to 90% success rate. Some rockets are going through, and so it puts Israel as well in a difficult position. Now, we also knew that it would be that hostages complicate things. I don't expect Israel to stop its strikes in exchange for hostages. At the same time, I don't know how successful a ground assault will be in retrieving hostages. It is a very, very dangerous game. I would view negotiations as a more likely outcome.
Hagar, we've also now seen U.S. authorities issue a do not travel alert to Lebanon amid ongoing cross-border tensions with Israel there. We've seen towns along that northern Israeli border evacuated as this unfolds. How concerned are you about this conflict spreading to Lebanon or getting other countries in the region involved?
Yes, I'm actually very surprised. It's actually only about 5 days ago that I told my own family in Lebanon that they should get out. And that the reason that they should get out, by the way, is not because I thought that war would hit where they are, but because things in Lebanon can turn upside down in 24 hours. It did when the last war between Israel and Lebanon happened in 2006. It was 24 hours before all mayhem broke out. And then the problem is the airports close. Everything shuts down, and then people can't get out. And then the U.S. government has to, or they have to coordinate massive evacuations because there are so many U.S. citizens there. So I've told my own family already. Numerous airline companies have canceled flights, and so I would agree with that. Not because I think war would spread, but I expect clashes, additional clashes in the south, and then for things to shut down.
All right, Hagar Shamali, thank you as always for joining us.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.